pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Period.
It's quiet.
Yeah, okay. Looks like that opens and closes at 7:01. And approval of minutes.
I move to approve.
Second?
Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, that passes. And then I presume you're here for the NRSE, is that correct? Are you expecting anyone else? Okay. We could move that item up to issue, unless anyone objects. All right. So, I don't know if Marion, if you want to give us overview, highlights?
Yep, happily. Can everyone hear me okay? Yep. Is my microphone on? No, it should be. Okay. So this request is for a natural resource special features exception for a property located between Loomis and Ryan Road on the western border of the city. There are two lots in question. See if the mouse will actually work. But the majority of the impacts, or the entirety of the impacts, are on lot 1 of a certified survey map that was conducted last year. These were several parcels, and they've been reorganized into 2 lots. The applicant is proposing to develop 26 duplexes, so 26 total homes on 13 building pads on this north lot. And in order to do that, he is requesting to impact wetland setback and buffer. Just for a little bit of context, this development is part of a cluster of development in this portion of the city. So immediately to the east of here is Ryan Meadows subdivision. Monarch Drive leads to a part of a business park, and then there's residential here. Muskego is immediately west, and this is a residential neighborhood. This easement area is owned by Wisconsin Energies. This is currently in the development phases of what trail that connects to the Muskego Trail network. And it begins farther north on 116th Street in St. Martin's. So the development will be served by sanitary sewer and municipal water. In addition to this natural resource special exception, an NRSE is a type of variance. So it's a type of a request for a change to the rules so that a developer can do something within still a context of rules. The applicant has also requested a variance because it's not clear to develop this site because there is only access off of Ryan Road, and it will be a single cul-de-sac in a very narrow developable area. He's also requested a variance to reduce the front yard setback so that he can then move the footprints of the buildings forward slightly if the review that must be conducted by the Board of Zoning Appeals, BZBA, and that review will occur next week, then it would be possible to reduce the wetland buffer impacts to 0. However, since the outcome of that is not known at this time, that request has been included. There's the 2 options. One is for a greater amount of impacts. So the site includes an area of sewer pack environmental corridor. It's a bit difficult to see in this lighting, but on this edge adjacent to the 116th trail is isolated natural resource area. That means that that means that at the time that these resource areas were mapped, that area was a high quality wetland and had other features that meant that it was considered high quality and important to protect. However, it's not connected to a larger area, which is why it's referred to. However, it's not connected to a larger area, which is why it's referred to as isolated. So the applicant conducted wetland delineations in 2014 and again in 2021 in pursuit of this development. And so the proposed impacts are for, there's no direct impacts to the wetland proposed. Proposed impacts are for, there's no direct impacts to the wetland proposed. The request is to allow for permanent and temporary impacts to the wetland buffer and the wetland setback. So the information provided to you in the packet, there was a question in my mind about how much temporary impact was being requested in the setback, and that's reflected in my report. The applicant clarified today a change to, not a change, but a clarification that the total wetland buffer impacts being requested is the greater amount to allow for 25,320 square feet of temporary impacts. And then depending on the approval of the variance, there will either be 0 wetland buffer impacts or the request would be for 1,350. Wetland setback impacts also differ, but then the temporary impacts would be a total of 0. So setback is the 50-foot distance from the wetland edge, and we'll have to make sure that that's correct in the final natural resource protection plan. But since the documents provided included the previous numbers, those were taken from the charts that are on the maps that you received, that is a technical correction that will also be required. So this is what the 25-foot setback would look like. So we talked a little bit about what the development looks like. It's a route off of Ryan Road with a cul-de-sac here and building pads around the perimeter of that. We did confer with engineering, and it's not possible to reduce the demise. Some of the elements of that, they can't move it or change the size of the cul-de-sac, so it does somewhat determine the location of these building pads. So there's impacts to the wetland buffer. There's impacts to the wetland buffer here, and then the setback beyond that for this building and this building and this building. So a relatively small amount, but these are permanent impacts proposed under the requirements. But these are permanent impacts proposed under the requirements of the zoning. One thing to know about this site is that a quantity of fill was placed on it. On March 14th, 2018, the developer received permission to place 37,500 cubic yards of fill on the site. That permitting process was approved through the Department of Natural Resources and also through the City of Franklin Engineering Department. At that time, the fill did impact the wetland setback and buffer, but not the wetland. So there were no direct permits or general permits from the DNR, and no approvals were sought for those setbacks from the Department of the City Development. So the applicant did provide the updated fill limits for Plan Commission review, and I'm sharing them with you because they weren't in your packets. You can see that it is essentially contiguous with the request before you this evening. So it's fair to say that you're also in effect reviewing that previous fill. One thing to keep in mind with an NRSE is that there is a requirement under the ordinances that the granting of this type of variance does not limit the city's ability to enforce the ordinance in the broader context. So that is a question that I think the commission needs to address. Overall, the development that is the applicant is making efforts to reduce the amount of impact and is seeking approvals at this time. However, given that the fill occurred earlier and as part of the context of the request, it's staff's recommendation that mitigation isn't required for these impacts at this time, that there be restoration done to the wetlands on the property as a result of those impacts. So, and so you can see with the 20-foot option, you can see that there are no buffer impacts, and then the impacts behind it. So with the 20-foot option, there would only be impacts to setback, which only requires restoration. This is obviously preferable. And then you can see the fill limits here. So I'm trying to think if I have another slide. Nope. Are necessary. Please.
Get some clarification.
Yep.
So what we're doing, so this is the 20-foot setback, meaning that we're reducing the setback by 5 feet, correct?
This request has been made of the Board of Zoning Appeals, BZBA. There's an extra letter that I can't remember what it's for.
That's fine.
So that is not under your.
Table.
Yep.
So it would make sense then that with the 20-foot option, we're obviously not having as much permanent damage to the wetland, right? So like that's just pretty much 5 foot off the whole space, 5 feet off.
Correct. And so I want to be clear, there's no request for an
Okay.
impact to the
Yeah, that's
wetland
fine.
itself.
Yep.
I
I just wanted like the numbers. I just wanted to make sure the numbers made sense to me. That's
Right, and what's in your report is not this information, so I mean,
Okay.
if, I'm happy to leave the table up.
No, that's-
So,
well, there was this information. It was right here.
these numbers are different,
We had the,
No, we had it
20.
setback as 1,001.
numbers are different.
we had the,
No, we had it
20.
setback as 1,105 feet for permanent impacts for building footprint. And then we have the buffer. We have it right here, under natural resource special exception request.
Yep, oop. The buffer amount is different, so what was provided in your packet was,
25,
23.
oh, it's 23, got it. Okay.
provided in your packet was,
25,
23.
oh, it's 23, got it. Okay.
so, and then there was not clarification of the quantity of setback
this
temporarily
number is
being
off.
impacted, so.
So
It
this-
remains the case that it's not clear how you would grade in the buffer and not the setback.
Okay,
So we need to get clarification on that information. Setback.
okay.
So we need to get clarification on that information. But this is the total request.
Dan,
Aaron, what kind of a impact are you talking about? Worst case scenario, what's gonna happen to the wetland buffer? I mean, to the wetland buffer? I mean, it's not like they're building on it. How is it gonna be impacted?
So it depends on which approval occurs at BZBA, but the permanent impacts would be for the building pad. So there either will or will not be an impact to the wetland buffer. You can see the 2 permanent impacts. That's strictly for the building pad. The other impacts are grading, and the placement of fill has already occurred. That fill was from
Can
a
you go back to the
DOT
map
permit.
picture
Yep.
and explain that to us?
So this is the 25-foot setback option. So you can see here, this with a garage, they're side-by-side duplexes, single story. And so the home will be built within the setback and buffer and essentially, potentially right next to the wetland in this case. Here, it's in the setback and a small quantity of the buffer, and likewise, mostly in the setback and the buffer. Buffers, so we do allow disturbances of setbacks with greater flexibility, but the buffer itself is protected. And so any grading impacts to the buffer, changes to the topography and character of the soils requires an NRSE. So,
Are these gonna be rentals or?
Or whenever
Well, I guess, this is my question. So this is a building pad, so we don't even know what it looks like. So if there's a house on this, we're pretty much saying if I have children, they're gonna go running outside, they could end up in the wetland if they lived in that bottom corner one, correct? Like they could be playing in weeds, I guess, right?
Well-
Or whatever is there.
yes, one of the markings
Yeah.
for the wetland setback.
Okay,
It is true that this will be on the property, and I mean, it's open space. However, it's more importantly, we don't want changes in terms of the types of plantings and that kind of thing. So, so there is a pond here on the eastern portion of the property. That's an existing pond on a different lot with some of it coming onto the applicant's property, the shoreline setback is shown.
The houses that are there, will they be taken down for this? It doesn't.
No, it's on a different
Yeah.
parcel altogether.
Okay, so there's another pond over,
There's another
Further
one
west.
west on,
okay.
Could you please state your name for us?
Sure, my name is Dan Shaw, I'm with Bear Development.
Okay.
Here tonight, representing Boomtown. Can I? So, just a couple points of clarification. This is a very, very complicated situation. We purchased this property in 2016. Basically an ag field. In 2018, we were approached by the Wisconsin Department of Transportation and their contractors, and they were seeking a DOT select fill site. And what a DOT select fill site is when fill site. And what a DOT select fill site is when DOT is doing road projects and the site is off balance with the amount of material. They seek sites that can accommodate fill. Fill is clean, it's structural, and technically the fill is clean, it's structural, and technically the fill operation is exempt from local regulations. But the contractor, the DOT, and Bear worked with the city for a permit here for the fill. So this fill, and all the impacts that we're speaking about tonight were permitted through the DOT, DNR, and the city of Franklin. So the contractors pulled that permit and they placed, compacted, and shaped the site, basically a tabletop condition. We had no plans for development at the time. I mean, we had plans for development, but there was no specific plan. So maybe it could be on us or it could be on the contractor, but in the city there was no restrictions on wetland buffers and wetland setbacks. So the fill was placed at 3 to 4 to 1% ratio slope up to the tabletop. Positive drainage going east and west as it always has on that site. So I think it's important just to note that the exceptions that we're asking for have already occurred. So that we are not impacting any of the wetland resource itself. We're looking to build on the structural fill that was already placed there. As far as the development, the fill was placed. This property was also incorporated into the TIF district number 6. So this area is encouraged for development, and it's encouraged preferably at a use highest and most valuable use. And so when we look at the area, we looked at this, and there was thoughts of industrial development here. The baseline zoning for the site is R8 multifamily. So when you do the site calculations for the site by right, as a matter of right, could accommodate 46 dwelling units. Right, as a matter of right, could accommodate 46 dwelling units. To accommodate 46 dwelling units, obviously they would have to be in an apartment form. That was not the direction we were that wasn't the direction that that wasn't the direction that anyone wanted to go. So what we came up with is a plan that owner-occupied condominiums. So ranch-style condominiums. The site, they fit on the site quite well. They fit on the site quite well. Obviously the target with a ranch condo is probably like an older demographic, so the rear yard is really not so important. So our footprints, our building pads work quite well with the design. That we're showing on the site. We did speak with planning. This is going back a ways about the variance that Marion referenced. And what we'd like to do is to get our building pads farther away from the wetlands. So this public right-of-way would have minimal traffic with, 13 building pads. So we felt like the front yard setback was at 20 feet was appropriate. And that lets us take the pads and get them farther away from the wetland as possible. Let's see. So in the scenario with the 20-foot front yard setback, we're looking at roughly 25,000 square feet of temporary impact. So if you're out there today, you're on this tabletop condition that goes down at a 4-to-1 slope. What we need to do is we need to get back there with dry utilities, We Energy, Spectrum Cable, all this stuff, backyard storm sewer. We need to shape the site so it drains properly to the storm basins. But all that stuff, all that material that's moved is going to be, and that's just a requirement. But we're not, we're not impacting the wetland. And the setback and the buffer in this particular case is a little bit unique because it's already been, we were legally permitted to, we were legally permitted to place that fill there. So, and then I just want to, just a couple comments, clarifications. As I said before, clarifications. As I said before, this plan was not in play when the site was graded. We just saw that the site was low. We were anticipating a development. We raised the site. We compacted it at 95 development. We raised the site. We compacted it at 95%. Had soils engineers out there making sure that the contractor, the DOT, was putting that material down in a structural fashion. And we do have two easements that cut through the wetlands right now. One's an ATC easement, and the other is a We Energies easement. So these wetlands, and if you go back in time and you look at historical aerial photos, basically where the wetland number 1 is next to that pond. So I guess I want to just point out that things change over time. This wetland's been impacted. We're doing our best to try to create something that's sensitive to the wetland, but we are very limited here in a very unique circumstance. The recommendations in the report, and I just want to have a conversation about one of the recommendations is that turf grass would not be allowed in the wetland setback. I think when you look at the wetland setback, the toe of the slope, the wetland setback is up on top of the graded, the tabletop, so to speak. So if we're not allowed to do turf grass, I think that might create some unattractive yards. I don't know what the alternative would be. Fill there in the wetland setback is not native. That's imported fill that came from Highway 100 road base and Hales Corners. It's great fill, it's great building material, but it's not anything that's going to support wetland plants. If that's the idea, is to maybe recreate, make a wetland, it's not going to happen. And then the other item is that the grading operation that occurred here under state local permits did not cause any degrade. So I would resist the idea that we're to restore the wetlands and remove invasive species and do a large wetland rehabilitation project over here, because I don't feel we caused any kind of. So those are my thoughts and just to provide some clarity on how this whole project came to be. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Madam Chair?
Sure.
If I could, sir, and it's in your Q&A packet, page 6, G4, the area between the wetland and future homes will be left natural, which means you're not going to put turf grass in.
Well, if you look at the pads,
No, that's what I'm about to ask. Do the pads include a grassy area, or is that just the building?
so there's a variety of size pads. Some are 80 feet by 60 feet wide. Some are 70 feet by 75 feet wide. Those are to accommodate by 75 feet wide. Those are to accommodate a ranch condominium. So you imagine, and it won't be a square rectangle. There's a lot of articulation on these buildings, but there will be. You can see where the if you look close up, the topo goes down to the wetland. If you look close up, the topo goes down to the wetland. We can certainly keep that slope natural. I mean, no one's going to want to try to maintain a 4-to-1 slope. But, I mean, I just want to be realistic that this fill that where these building pads are located, where these building pads are located is not wet. It's not natural. It's not going to be wet. It was placed and compacted for construction. So there will be a yard area,
Right,
but the yard will be, you'll have the building, some usable yard space, and then there's a slope down. So
are you going to be able to contain runoff from the yard area?
yeah, that's one of the main reasons why we're asking for to pick up drainage from the rooftops. We want to pick up drainage from the yards and from the road into a storm sewer, which would go to a detention basin. The solids settle out, and then it's released at a rate back to, the wetlands are replenished, but the water quality going back to the wetland.
The only other question I have, and quite honestly, I think you're doing a pretty good job of making the best of a rather difficult situation from all the soil that was brought in. And that is a question about spraying adjacent to the wetlands. They're going to want to fertilize, they're going to want to weed and feed, they're going to want to have pesticides to keep the mosquitoes out. Is there any way you can suggest, require, would be better, but that no spraying is done within, 5
I think we can come up with some creative recommendations. Everything's enforcement, right? So, I mean, we could state something that said, hey, you can't put the Scott's 4-step program on your lawn, but we're not going to be able to enforce that. And then I think the other, we're not going to be able to enforce that. And then I think the other thing too here to understand is that through these wetlands, there's folks that have rights to go through there. ATC, We Energies goes through these wetlands and they maintain their easements. And as a matter of fact, I just got a notice the other day. I should have forwarded it on to planning staff, but ATC gave me notice that they're going to be coming through and maintaining their easements. So what they do is they cut down anything under those lines and they spray it with herbicide to keep that down. And they spray it with herbicide to keep that down because they don't want to go through there very often. So as much as that we can control this and protect it, we certainly will. And I think the main point of protection here is like when we begin site development. We have a long way to go, but I think there's going to be some really strict erosion control protections along the wetland, double silt fence, protection fence, whatnot. We'll do whatever it is. I mean, I'd hate to be
You know, and I can't hide the fact either that if we wanted to avoid, I mean, the site accommodates twice as many dwelling units by right under the zoning. You know,
I proposed, but obviously you've cut back substantially.
we've massaged the site, we've pushed the cul-de-sac to the west, we've reduced the pad sizes, we've done everything we can to stay away from the wetland, because we know that it's important. But there's only so much we can do on the site, and I think it's important also to realize that, you know, it may be a sewer pack isolated natural area, but you've got an easement running right through it with We Energies, and these are not, they're wetlands, of course they're wetlands, and they do have some native species, but they are pure and clean. Especially with trucks driving in and out of there, you know, with maintaining easements and things like that. That's why I'm hoping that we can come to an agreement about restoring and rehabilitating these wetlands.
Thank you.
Can I just make a comment?
Sure.
So right here, it says that in 2014, there was a isolated natural resource, had a predominantly native sedge, meadow, and shallow marsh communities. And now in 2021, the new delineation finds that the wetland has been impacted by invasive species such as purple loose stripe. So my issue is that time is when those trucks were coming in and out. So your fill was coming in and out, getting filled for this site. And that's the same timeline as when this invasive species came in. And that's the same timeline as when this invasive species came in. So that's kind of why I'm like,
Well,
the restoration seems like an important part to it. In addition, if I'm going to be living as a 55-year-old or a 45-year-old or however I'm going to be in this, I'm going to want something that looks pretty out my back window, not an invasive. I'm going to want something that looks pretty out my back window, not an invasive manslaughter of whatever seems to grow in that wetland.
Sure, and I can address that a couple ways. I'm not sure what document, you know, like there is a wet sedge meadow back there,
Yeah.
and there is today.
Yeah.
Now, in 2014, one consultant prior to our purchase did a wetland delineation, and they're just like everybody else. They observe things out on site. Now in 2021, we had a different consultant go out and they observed, did our fill cause the purple loosestrife? I don't think anyone.
It is hard. It just seems very awkward that the time frame, and I know that purple loosestrife is in Hales Corner, so if that's where your fill came from, it would be kind of.
Our fill came from underneath the highway.
But you know what I'm saying though, segregated not because of you. That's okay to say, but on the flip side, as maybe a possible property owner, when I decide to retire someday and move out of my larger home into something smaller, I don't know if I necessarily just want cattails in a wet area. I'm gonna probably want something a little bit more. So why remove the whole restoration, providing you a wonderful community, we have a park-like setting, it makes sense versus letting whatever grows just grow.
Well, here's the thing. The only way to determine whether or not that wetland has had any kind of degradation whatsoever, I mean, no one can say, right? I mean, to do that would be to have like a floristic survey or a meander survey back in 2014 and compare it to 2021. Because one scientist observed purple loosestrife doesn't mean that purple loosestrife wasn't there in 2014. The person just didn't note it.
I didn't know science was magic.
Well, it's not. I'm just saying it's wetland.
Yeah, well, I'm not saying you did. I'm just saying I'm seeing the dates here, and I'm saying it seems maybe clearer to some, or I see the underlying picture here that yes, vehicles are moving in and out. I know plants can travel. I know that birds can bring things in. I have to restore the wetland. And I'm trying to have you have an idea of like, hey, maybe this restoration piece would actually be beneficial to your potential buyers.
Okay, I understand that. The one thing that I would counter with though is as I mentioned before, there's other folks that have rights to these wetlands in there. So say we went and did a bang-up job, and we spent $100,000 taking care of reed canary grass and loosestrife and everything like that. And then We Energies and ATC comes through every year and does their easements, and they're coming in from a truck from who knows where. Mitigation bank, so I'm really familiar with the challenges that wetland restoration involves. I mean, to restore that wetland, and I don't know of any standards no standards were given, but I mean, we're talking about a couple $100,000. And I mean, it's just like your garden. If no one, a couple $100,000. And I mean, it's just like your garden. If no one's maintaining it, you could, you know, when you get all excited about your garden, you plant it and pick all the weeds, and then sooner or later they come back, right? So this wetland restoration wouldn't be a one-time event either. Wetland restoration wouldn't be a one-time event either. It would be perpetual management. So I guess I'm just saying, I don't think it's our fault that there's invasive species in the wetlands, just like there's invasive species in almost every wetland. I don't think it's equitable for almost every wetland. I don't think it's equitable for us to go and restore a wetland that we didn't damage.
Can I give you a plausible idea here? So we're talking about making buckthorn a noxious weed. So if there's buckthorn in that wetland in 10 years, will your company go out? So if there's buckthorn in that wetland in 10 years, will your company go out and take out the buckthorn? It's on our agenda tonight to talk about. So like.
Okay, so there's another thing too, is that when we finally get to the point of platting this, you know, we're going to be obligated to put a conservation easement over everything that we don't touch.
Okay.
Those conservation easements that the city of Franklin requires are extremely specific. I don't think I'd have the authority to go in and cut buckthorn on areas where we threat. Just down the road on West Ryan Road. I mean, I'm just telling you,
So ideally what you're saying is that even if you were to restore it, you make it a conservation easement, you're done. So it's like kind of a waste, you're saying. So you could restore this wetland, it becomes a conservation easement, you can now no longer go on there, wetland could be degraded again in 10 years.
That's absolutely correct.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. I think we need
I don't mean to be difficult,
No, this is an ongoing, like we're questioning buckthorn all the time, and that was something that never came up of the buckthorn. And that makes a new challenge.
It does make a new challenge, and that's generally speaking, and I don't have the text in front of me, certain kinds of maintenance are permitted in conservation easements, but things like mowing are not. You can remove dead and diseased plants.
Okay.
And it also depends on what easement it was, because they have changed over time. So the current template that we use is very restrictive. It is an open question on how we will handle that going forward. Because that is a fair point.
Otherwise, I'm sorry, I wasn't trying to be difficult, but
Oh, no.
Thank you for your presentation though. I'm not ready for a motion yet, but I do like the 20-foot setback instead, because it does remove some of that 20-foot setback instead, because it does remove some of that permanent setback disturbance, I guess. So I do appreciate that. I highly recommend that going through. I don't know if we want to make that a motion. As for the fill, that I think is something that would be I don't know if we want to make that a motion. As for the fill, that I think is something that would be a DNR thing moving forward. It was permitted by the DNR, and so maybe it's something where, hey, you guys need to mark setbacks on properties better, but I can't go back to 2018 and make you do that now. So.
I think one of the recommendations that was in the report is that we demarcate the wetland boundary. You know, like after the site's developed, we put like signage, you know, or boulders or something.
Just to mark it.
You know, we're not interested.
We're trying to be as extremely sensitive with what the existing conditions are here. So we would certainly agree to anything like that.
What's up, Dan?
Points here. First of all, for the commission, just to keep in the back of your mind, and not aimed at this particular development, but anytime we require a berm or wetland rehabilitation, it's usually limited to a couple of years to come up that we've required berms. 5 years down the road, everything's dead, it looks like a mess, and nobody will take responsibility for it. So just to keep in the back of your mind, when we do that, when we require a berm, we need to have something that goes along with it that keeps it restored for down the road. It would be the same with this wetland if we were going to, I like what you did. I'm usually not in favor of, well, I'm categorized as being not in favor of development. I like quality development. This seems like a quality development. I'm not in favor of favor of owner-occupied residences such as this. So I think this is a very good use of the land. I think it's a very good development. I fully support it if we can work out the wetland issues. I like the 20-foot setback as well. And I think that's important. I think we should be able to, opposed to that, grant that variance. I think we really need to emphasize that. We like the project. If we do, we like it, but we want to really emphasize that setback is very important to us. But overall, I think it's a very good project, and like I said, I like quality projects, I like quality development.
Thank you.
I do have a question, and I'm sorry. I'm thinking like how you could close off the wetland, not close it off, but like so people know. Is the slope enough that you could almost put like a wall in? So that way you can level off, have your green space, and then a wall drops off, and then it's just natural area? Looking at,
I would discourage that.
okay. I was just like trying to like think how you could like
So,
make sure it looks nice. And,
so like, like this is going to be a condominium community, right? So collectively, these 26 families are going to be, owners of the open space, right? So anytime you do a common wall,
the cost goes on to
the cost, and
Okay.
I mean, and I don't want to bring
Split
up
rail fence.
finances or anything like that, but like that wetland restoration, that could kill this project, honestly. I mean, we're so tight on this thing, you know, we could use a lot more units to make this thing happen. And if I have to throw in $100,000 of wetland restoration that don't throw in $100,000 of wetland restoration that no one's going to enforce, that's just, I'd rather put that in the building.
Who does the fill belong to if you back out?
Oh, we own the site. It's
Oh.
our site.
So
I mean,
it's your fill.
we fully knew what was going on. It's
Oh.
our site.
So
I mean,
it's
we
your fill.
fully knew what was going on, and before we let the DOT fill there, we had our soils engineer out there with a nuclear gauge test, making sure that it.
I'm just kidding, but, you know, I appreciate what you're doing. I think it's a good project. My concern is that between the stress of the property is pretty well shot in the near future.
You know, I talked with our wetland consultant today about this, you know, specifically. I mean, I get pretty nervous about meetings and whatnot, and that wetland is actually in pretty good shape. I mean, he was very impressed on the 2021 on both sides. I mean, they are nice wetlands, but again, I don't think our project's doing anything to
Well, all the
endanger them.
property to your right on this map is for sale. I was there today. The big for sale signs all the way from the pond, all the way out to Loomis, and I don't, it's all gonna be under more development stress in the near future. But I think your project is a good one.
Thank you.
There's this lot 2 across Loomis Road. What, I didn't see any proposal, or what are the thoughts?
Actually, 4 or 5 parcels. We combined them. Back in the day, Loomis Road split this parcel, and we have like, I think 0.9 acres on the other side of the road. We have no idea. I mean, it's not part of this project.
Quick Trip would look really good. Sorry. Sorry.
Okay, yeah, and a large chunk of it is wetland or wetland buffer, so, okay. Didn't know if I'd missed that at all.
So what do we have to do for the next commission that sees this? So we can start our motions. Are the next commission that sees this? So we can start our motions and
So
start thinking about what we want.
the document that this commission produces is the Environmental Commission's recommendation to the Common Council, which is forwarded to Plan Commission as part of the legislative process. If you would like to make a recommendation to the Board of Zoning, BZ, and Board of Zoning Appeals, I cannot remember what BZBA stands for, sorry. You would have to take a motion to do that.
Okay.
Okay. And that recommendation I can pass on to the planner that staffs that body. So it would be appropriate to do that. And then the set of recommended conditions that was developed, includes a recommendation about invasive species removal. You can choose to forward that or alter the recommended conditions. But some of them are required, but should be part of your recommendation as well. So the recommendations are conservation easements, which the applicant is already required to do those through the certified survey map process, but they would then be determined by the natural resource protection plan that's approved through the NRSC process. A standard condition related to obtaining appropriate permits from other agencies. Plans for restoration of wetland setbacks. So the turf grass, the prohibition of that is from the Unified Development Ordinance. If the site conditions don't allow for that, we can talk to Plan Commission about it. And we always include a recommendation that Plan Commission require financial sureties for that restoration. The recommendation about boulders. There's technical corrections which have been mentioned in the report and still some are outstanding. Temporary grading impacts, and then the item about invasive species. So you could also choose to let them know your Environmental Commission finding and forward that document on the whole. Their packet has already been distributed, but I'm sure the planner could get the information to them. So.
Can I just ask one point of clarification?
Mm-hmm.
Under D, the applicant shall duration. Now, when we, hopefully this spring, summer, when we develop the site, the city will require a letter of credit as financial surety to restore the site.
Yep.
Is this
Included with that, basically Plan Commission would say we stipulate that you include information about it on your.
okay?
So you can also make a plan to do restoration and not describe the amount of money you're going to spend on it, but in order to, Plan Commission makes that recommendation, so it's not up to Common Council.
Okay, and then I guess just again, we respectfully request that condition number 8H, or letter H, be deleted.
And I think Dan's comment of invasive species.
If we require removal, I think it should be continuous. If we don't require continuous, then it'll be done, and that's it.
Yep.
But that's up to everyone.
Have the condition H, applicant shall provide for removal of invasive species and restoration of native wetland species in wetlands 1 and 2.
I wasn't suggesting that it was necessary, I was just suggesting that probably.
Modify the language, if it's included. I like having it.
Could we, so I'm looking at the property here, okay? So the far right side is where those easements are.
That's a large ATC easement. I believe it's 110 feet wide.
Is this on your property?
It's adjacent to and it bisects that wetland complex.
That's
There's-
right.
ATC,
Yeah, so there's
transmission lines,
basically power lines
and then this.
here in the red, and then
We requested something where we had like the idea of sureties for wetland. Because ATC comes in and does that easement cutting, like you said, and I'm gonna take your word for it, because I'm pretty sure they probably do. To me, it doesn't make sense to have them continue cleaning up that wetland if it's gonna be cut down. So, and it's, hopefully you understand, I'm going for you on this one, on that side of it. But because we have the sewer pack, even though it doesn't necessarily mean that it's like quality, that small little portion, I would say we would want to make sure that, and you're barely touching that, so who knows how much you've actually even dealt with, bad looking. I would say that would be the one side, just so that we have that protection area, like solidified, that we know that that's not going to be overly. Does that kind of make sense to you? Like dividing up the two areas. So the side with the easement, like I get it. If they're going to be coming in and cutting down, I don't think you should be.
I think there's a difference between having it look attractive and what this condition actually means.
Yeah.
The invasive species removal and restoration of wetlands 1 and 2 is easily a six-figure proposition here. This project can't afford it, and I guess what I'm saying is I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's fair. We did not have any responsibility for any kind of invasive species going in those wetlands. So responsibility for any kind of invasive species going in those wetlands. So why? I mean, does this happen to everybody in Franklin? Where, if someone, say you're in a backyard or something, and you need a wetland or an NRSE, and then again, who enforces? And then again, who enforces this? Because a invasive species and wetland rehabilitation project is perpetual. I mean, to do this right, there's a lot of science that goes behind this. That we're talking about controlled burning, annual herbicide treatments. I mean, if someone's going to annual herbicide treatments, I mean, if someone's going to say like we want a specimen wetland out here, I want to make sure everyone understands what the request is on us, because it's really burdensome. And I'm not sure that because we own the property, I'm not sure we were actually signing up to, a very intense natural resource rehabilitation project, because it's perpetual.
So-
I mean, to keep that wetland project, because it's perpetual.
So-
I mean, to keep that wetland out of invasive species is almost an impossible task. I'm just telling you that from,
Are you going to have a homeowners association?
yes.
Okay, they contract with the landscaper. Couldn't they themselves work something out in that respect?
But
Couldn't they themselves work something out in that respect?
but then that's just transferring that very expensive proposition to 26 folks there. And I mean, quite frankly, who's going to police this? Who's going to give the developer the standards to say? Who's going to police this? Who's going to give the developer the standards to say what is wetland restoration mean? I mean, that's a big door to open.
Others have done it. Like we've sat here, well, I've been on this, and others have done it. So they've come up and they've provided us, this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna plant these plants. We are gonna do this. We are gonna do that. Like, so I'm trying to work with you, because I totally get this one side doesn't work. But what I'm trying to say is we do have, Sewer Pack has identified this as a isolated area of significance. That's an overarching saying that. I'm just trying to say, can we at least have some funds to make sure that we are trying to hold that identified isolated area to some sort of standard? That's what I'm just requesting. And I understand, like, you don't want to pass the burden on to the next person. I was passed a burden on my home, right? Like, I have something I got. Like, I didn't know about it, found out about it, now I have to deal with it.
I guess what I'm trying to be really careful with is trying to not say something
I know.
that I can't perform.
I get
Because
it.
honestly, I mean,
So
I went to school for natural resources. I know what this means. And
the recommendation, we recommend that some sort of, whether it's just maybe a maintenance plan of some sort to, make sure that the invasives are gone, something like that. Maybe not making it monetary might be helpful.
I would agree to some type of management
Agreement.
prescription
Yes.
of how this wetland should be maintained, and if there's, we can work something out, but
Yeah.
I just don't want to say like
you don't
we're
wanna
gonna
put
go,
restoration.
we're gonna go remove all these invasive species, and I'm gonna plant plants for you, and we're gonna do all
Yeah.
this. Go remove all these invasive species, and I'm gonna plant plants for you, and we're gonna do all
Yeah.
this great stuff, and then when we're out of this,
Because you're trying to make money too. You want to.
well, it's.
I get it. I totally get it. And I think a management plan might be a better option in this instance versus having you go through and completely restore it. Because like versus having you go through and completely restore it. Because like we said, we saw it. I don't have the delineation, so it's not like I can count and say, oh no, there's 35 this and 20. I can't do that. But let's make sure that we're not completely throwing it off to the doorstep and not having anything responsible to it. So I think a management did off to the doorstep and not having anything responsible to it. So I think a management plan, and it could be anything. Like Pat said, it could be the landscaping company coming in and managing that area.
Okay, I have wordsmithing, that's my job.
Okay.
Management plan on future wetland sustainability.
Yeah,
Does that
something.
work?
Does that,
Future wetland sustainability.
yeah,
Does that
something.
work?
Does that work for you? Because I want to work with you as well, because I think this is a very awesome complex. It's like perfectly situated, and go ahead, Dan.
I think whenever we have a development, and sometimes we give a little bit over here, and we get a little bit more over here, and we give and take on both sides. I think this is a very good development for this area. I support this. I like multi-residential owner-occupied. I think it's a very good development. I would hate to put requirements on this. I fully understand that the one easement you have no control over, the others coming in. I get that. But yeah, I like where you're going with the other one on the other side, some sort of a plan. And I guess if that's where it's at now, to restore it to a pristine, I guess, I don't want to put undue requirements on that.
I think.
The other thing is that I want to just quickly point out, I like the cul-de-sac idea. I think it's good for a neighborhood, and I think the neighborhood and the home association, I think they'll be a very good unit together. And I think eventually you got another one that close by that cuts down buckthorn on their own.
Yep,
and
that's me.
maintains their- Yeah.
That's me.
So, I think that happens in places. So I think you'll want to take interest in it as well. But I think something in between is certainly reasonable. I don't want to put maybe too onerous that we jump future as well. So I think I like the way this is going, and I think we're having a very good discussion.
So could we strike D and instead just put applicant shall provide a management plan for the western wetland? Because then that way we're really just hitting that, like that buffer zone. You don't even have to go technically into the wetland. We're really talking about what is really going to be impacted, and it's just a management plan. So if that means removing those invasives, a management plan means removing invasives or managing that area. So
For the buffer and the setback.
you haven't touched that wetland on that western side yet, at least it doesn't look like it. It looks like the grading maybe has touched the setback and maybe some of the buffer. So I would say that that is where that management plan should be, not necessarily having you restore that whole thing, because maybe the buffer and that's it. So I think it's a nice compromise of just managing that small area, and whether that becomes the homeowners association, I think that would be a nice, other than that, I think all the recommendations on here besides that one, just changing it to a management plan of that western buffer and setback would be an appropriate.
So, C, to
Yeah.
developer or the applicant shall provide a management plan on future wetland sustainability for the wetland buffer and setbacks on the west side of the property.
That
Yes.
is wetland 1.
Thank
Yep.
you. Thank you.
So not the entire wetland, but the wetland buffer,
Yep.
and then wetland from any, okay. I
Yeah.
got you. No, I mean, that's reasonable. I'm just asking, like,
Well,
not to
you
break
have
our
to
back. Yeah.
Be on like the big thought and you
Yeah.
detail
No,
things.
I get it.
One question with regard to management is that you mentioned in 2014 when the survey was performed, they left out or possibly not noted the different vegetation being identified clearly, or?
So in the wetland delineation in 2014, what they do is they do data points. They go through and they delineate the wetland boundary, but they also describe what's in the wetland.
Right.
So they'll say, this wetland has 30% cover of Green canary
Okay.
grass, whatever. I did compare those today because the data points are the similar.
Okay.
And it's basically the same vegetation. Before we ever even bought the site,
Right.
it's basically the same.
Okay.
So that's why I guess I'm pushing back a little bit, saying, hey, we didn't do anything here.
Right.
Because Sewer Pack calls it an isolated wet sedge meadow or whatever. Maybe, I don't think Sewer Pack's ever come onto our property. So I
Yeah.
want to be just
Yeah,
fair.
no, I understand.
But
I just wanted to make sure so that for the future management, you can say these were identified.
oh, there's a benchmark. Yeah,
Okay.
there will be a
Alright.
benchmark
Okay.
for sure.
You can say these were identified.
Oh, there's a benchmark. Yeah,
Okay.
there will be a
Alright.
benchmark
Okay.
for sure.
I mean, this would require Sewer Pack to come out there, but the planning could request that Sewer Pack come and reevaluate that wetland and stake the boundary of the isolated natural resource area. Since they do field surveys for some of this work. I can't speak to whether or not they've been on this property in particular. but-
Both delineations in 2014 and 2021 were done by an assured wetland delineator that was, they have to qualify to be assured.
Yeah. It's like any license.
They have to qualify to be assured.
Yeah. It's like any license.
That's
Uh,
true. So,
You don't want Sewer Pack out there. I'll just tell you this, if you're planning a trail through there,
Oh, yeah.
I would suggest that you do not have them out there.
they're aware of the trail.
All right.
So it's a management plan.
All right.
So it's a management plan and also implement the plan. I mean, we want more than just a plan.
Yeah.
It needs to be, and does that go to the plan commission then?
So your recommendations
For
will go to
department?
Plan Commission, the management plan. So your recommendations
For
will go to Plan
department?
Commission, the management plan, it's too late to provide it for that meeting. So we would hope that the applicant could provide a draft by a common council, but then it would be working with staff, because we would be the ones reviewing it, so.
So do we have to
What?
go through these 8 recommendations here and kind of fine tune them as far as, because of the sign off then, or I don't understand
Well,
what suggestions that we're making here,
yep, so right now you're revising the recommended conditions.
that we're making here.
Yep, so right now you're revising the recommended conditions of approval.
Okay, and it's setting forth the Environmental Commission recommends approval or denial of the application upon the aforesaid recommendations for reasons set forth therein. Then it says the Common Council recommends, the Environmental Commission recommends that should the Common Council approve the application, it be subject to the following conditions. So do we want to go through each of these conditions and just, are they,
Should we, Are you talking about like for number?
This is what basically
We're
Linda
gonna
and
sign
Jamie are going to be signing off on and
Yep.
forwarding.
And we have been modifying a couple of them.
Yes,
So I
so
think we
we'll-
should definitely go through them.
Go through them?
Yeah.
Okay.
So do you want to read them? Like, go.
I don't know if we need to reread them, but if, does everyone?
Nothing was changed to A, correct? Conservation easements. B is good, it's talking about federal and state regulatory agencies. C is what we kind of have to talk about, because this is the one that has the turf grass in it. So I kind of was starting to wordsmith it here, but I had the applicant shall provide plans for management of wetland setback that conforms to, for appropriate plantings. And then we have the question about turf grass because of the gradings. Where are we gonna, I know that's an ordinance, so would that be something where we would say okay to, or how would we do that, Marion?
You can make a recommendation of something different. Typically, basically, we're invasive grass that is planted on all lawns.
Yeah.
You are allowed to use other types of materials in areas that are subject to erosion.
Yeah.
So there's some flexibility there
So we know that it's probably gonna be subject to erosion because there's a grade there.
because of the slope. Yep.
So really, should we leave it, or,
Yep.
so really, should we leave it, or is it something that would be, or could we put something where in cases of erosion, turf grass will be acceptable, or how would, I don't know how to wordsmith it.
That's,
Cause, or how would, I don't know how to wordsmith it.
that's,
Cause you mentioned that turf grass would wanna be used because of the slope.
Well, if you look at the plan, like on the slope,
Yeah.
we would definitely provide some kind of no-mow type grass, like a native
Okay.
grass, right? Not a turf type grass, like a native
Okay.
grass, right? Not a turf grass. But if you look at where that wetland setback is through the site, it's that purple line, right? So those are backyards. So if you tell me that we can't plant turf grass there, that's kind of an issue. Because that's kind of an issue. Because those are people's yards.
So do we wanna say something like use turf grass to the setback, or, oh gosh, now maybe my
we can't change what the
ordinance
ordinance
says.
says.
So we should,
So-
that would have to go to, like, we can't change it, but can plan.
You can make a recommendation that's different than what is in the ordinances. Whether or not
Okay.
that is possible is a different question. Because that is basically the text of the ordinance is turf grasses are prohibited, so.
Okay.
I'd be comfortable with working with the applicant on that, but, I mean, having like a lawn back there may not be possible under the text of the ordinance.
Well, if you just look at the grading though, the existing grading.
Yeah.
That's a tabletop. I don't even know, could you
Right
grow
here?
something that's not turf grass there, right? Like if I
No, it doesn't have to be a wetland plant. but
Exactly,
Jim's looking for an area to do some native plantings and
Well,
pollinators.
this is not it.
No,
Now, I'm kind of in favor of leaving this the way it is. I think you could do sedges, you plan on doing proposal, and there's no reason that, you can put grass as far as you want if you've got that hill then, and you have sedges or other native grasses below that.
Oh, yeah, that's,
That should do the job, and native plants will invade.
I just see the top of the slope, between the toe of the slope and where the grade becomes level. That could all be natural, non-turf grass, but if
You're
you
not
see
gonna
like,
wanna mow that anyway.
yeah, no, that's fine. We're good with that.
Yeah, we put just turf grasses or other natural, or give a recommendation of other grasses, or,
So we're on C here?
we're still on C.
What are
We're
we,
still
how are we
wordsmithing.
wordsmithing that? What are we changing?
Well, that's what we're still talking about.
Okay.
So instead of restoration, we would put management. And I'm not sure if we necessarily need the standard part there anymore, if that's because that's a statute. Do we wanna, we can
Yeah, I'd have to check the ordinance. Other types of grasses would be acceptable. I mean,
Yeah.
prairie plantings
Or
are
native.
common.
Yeah.
So we could just
in
say,
setbacks, so.
keep turf grass prohibited, but yet other grasses would be acceptable,
Or native planting.
or native plantings. And then after that, so conservation and restoration information, including maintenance information, shall be included on the development plans, including landscape. We might want to just change conservation and restoration into a management and, what did you say earlier? Implementation. Okay, what did you say earlier? Implementation.
Implementation.
Okay, so turf grasses are prohibited, other grasses acceptable, non-vegetative cover is permitted in areas subject to erosion. Okay, if cover is permitted in areas subject to erosion. Okay,
Here, I'm gonna give it to you, because I have it right.
okay,
Other grasses and native ground covers?
I said native planting.
Should
And
we
then-
have city forester input, because that's a wide open statement, right? Any type of input, because that's a wide open statement, right? Any type of,
He doesn't, it's not his area.
okay,
So if there were trees, I mean, there are trees on the site being impacted.
I see.
There are seed mixes that are pretty common recommendations in other plans that I could
Got it.
share with you, Dan. That would be appropriate, so.
Wetland shall provide plans for management
It
of
becomes
wetland setback that conforms
very
to the
general,
standards.
any type of.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Grasses are prohibited, other grasses are native plantings.
Yeah, I think we've had other native
Plantings.
planting mixes,
Yep.
seed mixes, things like that they would be.
And then non-vegetative cover is permitted in
Using.
areas of subject to erosion, and then management and implementation,
okay, so grass conservation
and restoration,
and put in
management and implementation, information shall be included on the development plans.
See, but so be it then.
Implementation.
Quite
But
well.
look at that map, that's a pretty
Well, I know.
complicated map.
Yeah,
Implementation,
yeah.
We did a small miracle.
Our
for
recommendation
Lancaster.
goes with that.
and that's it.
information shall be included on development plans, including landscape plans, okay.
And then, okay.
Okay, D,
See, so we can all
okay,
be on the
all right,
same
let me
page.
read it as I have it here. The applicant shall provide plans for management of wetland setback that conforms to the standards of the number 15, whatever, for appropriate plantings. Turf grasses are prohibited, other grasses acceptable planting.
Is that what it says in the standard 15-4.01021? Does that, do you know, Marion? Are we
Sorry,
adding?
what's the question?
I think the standard is for the types of vegetation you would plant, right? For that 15, that
Yeah,
statute.
and
It's
turf,
vegetation you would plant, right? For that 15, that
yeah,
statute.
and turf grasses are specifically prohibited. So
Prohibited, and so for us saying
You could allow
other
other
native
types of.
plantings to
Yep.
go in, we don't
Yeah.
really need that language, do we?
It would be helpful just in terms of
Identifying,
identifying what your preference is. Helpful just in terms of identifying what your preference is.
So we're leaving in the
Because
other
there are not
grasses
planting
acceptable
specifications.
as our native plantings.
yes.
Okay, sorry.
Non-vegetative cover is permitted in areas subject to erosion. Management and implementation information shall be included on development plans, and implementation information shall be included on development plans, including landscape plans.
So, that would be great. I just want to clarify, this management plan then is going to be incorporated into the development plan. The landscaping plans at the end of the day, incorporated into the development plan. The landscaping plans at the end of the day. So I'm not going to be obligated to give you a management plan. The management plan will be part of the development agreement for the project, not before Common Council would get to see this NRSE.
Is that correct?
Okay, just because if I give you a management plan, then we're gonna open it up for 3 rounds of review again, so. I mean, if that's okay, I think that's
So,
what,
I think our goal is to make sure that you'll be held accountable to have a management strategy in place. Like, I'm not looking for your management plan tomorrow before you start building a house, like, or
Yeah. are the landscape plans for this condominium.
Yeah. That's,
But this will carry, you guys will carry this over into the council development
Yeah.
agreement.
should we add that, like, will the land, do we need to add anything?
So
Make
you
sure.
could add something that is subject to staff review, development agreements, but I would probably want to see planting lists.
Okay.
Um,
So after including landscape plans and should be, like, within this statement, how should we add it? Should be reviewed by planning
Yeah, Department of City Development.
and should be. She was doing something else.
I think I'm gonna have to take this home and retype it and bring it back tomorrow.
Oh, no.
Yeah, Gail's not gonna be able to read this.
Okay, do you want one?
Yeah.
Just a
whatever.
final statement at the end, and should be.
Yes, it's the kinds of grasses that are common for lawn planting, so I can't really name the species. But yeah.
Could we do a native seed mix and mow it?
Yeah.
And mow, it depends on the terms of the contract.
Like fold comes out, right?
Yeah.
Where you have an intersection of a curve and a wetland setback, where on the east side of the bowl of the cul-de-sac. I mean, basically, that's gonna be
Native grasses, and I'm probably gonna get a letter from the city saying I'm violating a weed ordinance. I'm just trying to be realistic.
Yep. Gravel. Gravel, yeah.
We'll figure it out. I think this is
Yes.
manageable. We can,
So D we canceled, correct? Crossed it
I
out.
thought Marion said we have to have D.
The applicant should provide financial sureties for implementation and restoration.
It's not a requirement, so it's a recommendation to Plan Commission that they can create the requirement of financial sureties.
And we said, instead of doing the financial sureties for the implementation and restoration, we said not to restore, but we wanted to make sure we're managing. So that's kind of why we canceled D. And then this is just our recommendation, so if they want to bring it back, we can. E is the boulders, we're keeping that. F, technical corrections, which they've already talked about. G, applicant should clarify why temporary grading impacts are greater under reduced, which they've already discussed. Should we keep it though?
So there is still the question
have the
of
question.
what temporary impacts will be occurring in the wetland. Still the question of what temporary impacts will be occurring in the wetland setback. There's this 0 here.
Got it.
Are you not gonna be doing any work in the setback? Like, I'm a little confused. This is something that can be, so you show the grading, this is something that can be, so you show the grading impacts to the buffer, then the setback, the amount of impact is described only for the building pad as the permanent impact, so,
I,
Probably be the same.
We'll just leave,
I,
Probably be the same.
we'll just leave it in, they can clarify.
okay.
Yeah, they can
Yeah.
clarify it later. And then we removed the last one about removal of invasive species and restoration again, because we're doing that management plan.
Let's see.
So
At
we-
C.
instead of then,
At C.
instead of then 8, we have 6
Yep.
recommendations.
Yes.
Okay. Instead of going with ABC, I'm counting
Yeah.
6. Okay.
Yes, because we deleted 2.
Yep.
Yeah, so D and H have been removed.
And then we've revised C. That was a good night.
Yeah. One item done. Okay, I
That was a
think,
lot, though.
are we ready for a motion?
So I make a motion to move forward our recommendations as wordsmith.
Revised.
As
Thank you,
revised.
as revised. Tonight.
Okay. Second?
I second that.
Can someone second it?
Yeah.
Who did?
I did.
Sharma?
This circumstance?
Yep.
Okay, Chair
Aye.
Linda,
Aye.
Vice Chair Grook,
Aye.
Secretary Palmhawk is abstaining from this natural resource special exception. Alderman Mayor,
Aye.
Commissioner Sharma.
Okay, I think motion carries.
Do you want to take a motion regarding a recommendation to the Board of Zoning Appeals?
Yeah. So I make a motion to recommend the 20-foot setback, that the contractor,
Variance for the 20-foot setback.
applicant, thank you, that the applicant is requesting.
I'll second.
Who seconded it? Jim?
She's like,
I'll second.
Who seconded it? Jim?
yep.
And again, the motion was recommending a 20-foot setback
Yeah.
option.
As the applicant has requested, or the variance.
Variance to use a 20-foot setback.
Yep,
Variance to use a 20-foot setback.
yep,
Board of Zoning and Building Appeals.
yes, there you go.
And again, we're doing a roll call. Chair Horn,
Aye.
Vice Chair Grove,
Aye.
Secretary Pomahawk abstains, Alderman Mayor,
Aye.
Secretary Pomahawk abstains, Alderman Mayor,
Aye.
Commissioner Cieslak,
Aye.
Commissioner Sharma.
Okay, motion carries.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much for your
No.
time. Sorry it's still coming.
So for
Yeah.
your explanation.
Thanks for putting up with us.
And, all right, should we go back to our unfinished business? We have our involvement in Arbor Day 2022. Trees and shrubs, or have you heard anything?
I'm not sure if any member of the commission has spoken to him about it, but he plans on joining you at your next meeting to discuss Arbor Day and the selection of trees.
Okay,
So he's looking forward to it.
okay.
Wait, hold on a second.
Sorry.
Organized here.
Let's take a moment.
Okay, I have the Arbor Day. I looked up from 2022 what we did order, so I have that. But again, you said we're going to be discussing that at the February meeting?
Yeah, Tom, is that
Okay.
Tom is going to come and join?
To place the order with Washington County? Because they have certain, yeah, because I know in the past, we've always done the order at the January meeting. So just saying, you might want to check with Tom to see timeline-wise.
I will do that. I will do that.
Okay,
So he was not able to join this evening for a couple of constraints. So.
okay. Last year, just to remind everyone, we had a couple of shrubs which seemed to go over real well for homeowners that have smaller properties. We had the elderberry for homeowners that have smaller properties. We had the elderberry and the high bush cranberry. And then for our trees, we had the white cedar and sugar maple. So,
I think there was an oak in there too. Like a
Yeah,
white,
he
a
got
white
some
oak.
free ones
And then
oh,
we had
he brought
arborvitae.
something, yeah,
from
didn't he?
another
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
one,
And
Oh,
then we
he
had
brought
arborvitae.
something, yeah,
from
didn't he?
another,
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
but yeah. I think
And
there
then,
was two or
also
three.
for that, we recommended doing some smaller type, patio, plantings for those that do not have a lawn.
Yes,
So I-
container,
yeah,
container?
Container
Mhm.
plantings, yes.
Yes,
So I don't-
container,
yeah,
container?
Container
Mhm.
plantings, yes. I don't know what those would be, so we might have to see what they offer.
So Tom will be at the next meeting in February. Okay.
Anything else that we want to discuss today? on this?
Before you go on, are we do you want to do another garden giveaway at this event? Where we do a raffle or whatever you want to call it? It would cost $140.
I think that I like having it at National Night Out.
I'd like to have it at both.
Yeah,
We have a $500 budget approved, as I understand it.
I don't know if it was reasonable expenditures.
Well, I guess I'm asking then, do Alderman, do we have $500 commitment from the city, or?
Yes, we do, yes.
Okay. I'm not asking for all of it. In fact, I'm hardly asking, you know, either yes or no, that's all I'm asking.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, I'll do the promotion. Yeah, I'm happy to do it. The seed packets are, I can work that out. We'll do a giveaway of seed packets. I'm not sure how many I'll be able to come up with by then, but it should be a reasonable number. And, you know, I attended a program last week right here at Weir Nature Center where a guy from Prairie Future Seed Company, the owner, do native plant gardens. And it was a really good program. If we can get the approval from the library to use the federal room or something, either here or there, he's willing to come. I think we could do a gardening program for people who want to be introduced to the concept or do more of it. Randy Powers would be an excellent speaker. I'm willing to stick my neck out there and talk about why it's worth doing. And I could gardening stores to do booths if we have enough room, but we need a commitment for space before I want to go that far, so.
We also, I talked to a resident too, she does a butterfly garden, like she's very I even asked her, I'm like, would you be willing to do like a small talk? Like, a little hesitant, and I was like, well, I'm not gonna put you under, you know, I'm not gonna make you do it, I'll come to you before, but we would also probably be able to use her as well.
Sure.
So we wanted to do something where there was like multiple like kind of talks, like, oh, this is a 20-minute talk, and then we'll have another 20, you know,
Right.
different things, we can have almost like a seminar type.
Mm-hmm. Does she have like an apartment or a patio?
Almost like a seminar type.
Mm-hmm. Does she have like an apartment or a patio or?
She's a house.
She does?
Yeah,
So
she's
she got a big
garden.
garden?
My cul-de-sac, yeah.
Okay.
So she has the front yard and the backyard. She does the whole butterfly. So that might even be something where she can, since Arbor Day is decently late this year in May, Arbor Day is decently late this year in May, she could even talk about getting your monarch, she's monarch sort of thing, the monarch eggs and how to do those over summer.
Is somebody willing to approach the library or,
Did you Did you do that yet, Pat, or not? For Arbor Day celebration?
Well, this probably comes as good a time as any to say that my term as commissioner is up in April, and I have been on the commission for 7 years. So commissioner is up in April, and I have been on the commission for 7 years. So going forward, I will give you contacts that I've had with Milwaukee Riverkeeper, with the DNR. We'll need another library facilitator. Basically, when Dan goes, I go.
No.
what is this, a conspiracy?
I couldn't work with another alderman. So going forward,
Okay,
yeah.
so you haven't contacted
No.
the library about me?
Nope.
Okay. I can do that if you want to, was it Jennifer, or you can, afterwards you can give me the contact and I'll.
Yeah, like I say, the Arbor Day, they help us, well, again, they will have tables, et cetera, available. And they usually have the custodial fellow. We start at 10 in the morning. The custodial fellow will be there like at 9:30, helping set up. And last year, again, we're always to have inside as well for Arbor Day, just in the event that. But usually, you know, with that canopy over the front of it, we've lucked out other years.
Okay, and I think, I believe it's May 7th is the appropriate date. So I will contact the library and see if we can have the federal room for that day, or at least until noonish, 1 o'clock, somewhere then.
We do have a couple local gardeners that I specifically growers, you know, Lamb's Nursery, and the other one escapes me at the moment, but I'd like to encourage local growers to participate in the event if we can. So I'll approach them.
Okay.
Participate in the event if we can. So I'll approach them.
Okay, thank you.
I have more for the next meeting.
Okay, anything else, Arbor Day?
No.
All right, did we get any articles, any aspiring writers? Any aspiring writers? If not, we've got the Buckthorn one.
As far, I have not heard back from Patrick Gain. I contacted him in December once I had the schedule. For distribution of the 5 City of Franklin newsletters with also the deadline dates. And again, he was, you know what I'm saying, well aware of it, but don't forget that with condition with, you know, maybe some virtual learning or however.
Yeah, they were on break.
Yeah. So I don't think we'll see anything for the coming February. I would hope by the spring we have one, because then don't forget, over vacation, we're not going to get any. So if we get 2 a year from take over being my contact.
Yeah, I've messaged him before,
Okay.
and yeah, I'll
Okay.
reach out. Well, we could also do middle school with Hushik as well, because she does like their outdoor club type thing, and she's pretty good size.
Go. Goodness, this February distribution date is like the 18th and 19th. The deadline for submission is
Friday.
January 14th. It would be so nice. I'm just looking when the next newsletter comes out. If we can just put in what we decide for the handout, you know, if they read that and maybe plan ahead a little bit.
I mean, since we don't have like a list of trees selected, maybe just to save the date,
Yeah,
and then,
yeah, because the next one was missed the Arbor Day.
yep,
Yep, good point, Pat.
check the web after your next meeting.
In mid-February, that would be easiest.
Yep. End of February.
Yeah,
End of February, because that way it's
Well.
not like, check the website now. February, the day they get it. Save the day of Arbor Day.
can get that into the newsletter.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. All right, moving on to C, Buckthorn Subcommittee, survey article questions. We had the list, updated list.
This time.
I know, you like that? So when it goes into the survey, whenever we use for a survey, these come up as buttons, like your agree, disagree, etc. We used the busting buckthorn suggestion, and that link would be if somebody's coming in for the paper copy, we could have it attached or back or front, however we want to do it. And then we kind of divvied those 23 questions down to 10 questions. So now it's just kind of easier, quicker.
Jamie, is this survey going to be appearing in the City of Franklin newsletter? Is it going to be online that they take it, or is it going to be a separate handout?
So we're going to offer it online, and then we're also going to have a printed off
Handout.
So we're going to offer it online, and then we're also going to have it printed off here at City Hall. We didn't want to add the additional cost of a piece of paper for people to take a survey when we think that it'll be adequate for them to use their phone for it. And then for those that are still paper copy, use their phone for it. And then for those that are still paper copy, people will have it available. I believe we said we're going to do the library and City Hall here at City Hall. I think City Hall would be the best place so they can take it and drop it off right away, but,
Okay, so in the upcoming newsletter,
yeah,
there's going to be the separate paper. Okay, so in the upcoming newsletter,
yeah.
there's going to be the separate paper copy, or they're going to do it.
So we'll have it online, and then we'll have instructions for a paper copy for a resident to come to City Hall to grab.
Okay, got it.
And something will be noted in this newsletter.
Yeah,
And something will be noted in this newsletter.
yes. Our goal is to have it done by Friday,
Perfect, okay.
right? That's when
And
we
this
have
is much user-friendly, like I said, when I read the first one, you know, I well, you know, my issues I had with the personal information.
Yep.
That just really,
Well, and then we kind of came down to like, do we really need it? Like, I can look at demographics, so I don't think we all need it either.
So a couple of comments. This survey actually doesn't need to start until the publication date of the newsletter.
Okay.
You should determine a limited time period that the survey, and then we can set up like return boxes at the counter at the Department of City Development, and then if you want to have one at the library, if there's a space for that, for them to drop it off, then I can, you know.
yeah, there's a table when you find out that says compliments of the Franklin Environmental Commission, where we've got something from Milwaukee Riverkeeper. So I don't think they would be opposed to having a drop box or something like that. There seems to be enough room on that table.
Yeah.
Talk to Jennifer anyway regarding the Fadra room for Arbor Days, so possibly you can just, you know, include that at the same time.
You would make up this box then?
Sure.
I don't know if the library has something.
Sometimes the library, they're kind of fun to work with.
They have a 3D printer.
Do they
Yeah.
really? Oh, in
Yeah.
that like maker space area.
Not suggesting you go all out, but.
Yeah, doesn't go.
Yeah, I could just see, I forget who it is, but it's kind of cute. I forget who it is, but it's kind of cute because when we've advertised like various talks that we've had at the library, depending what the theme is, whether it be like that upcoming talk we were going to have April of 2020 that was canceled, it was on flooding. Of April of 2020 that was canceled, it was on flooding. So the background from the advertisement in the City of Franklin, or in the library's monthly newsletter that they had like raindrops and whatnot, you know, just the appropriate type of background, kind of theme related, and whatnot, you know, just the appropriate type of background, kind of theme related. So they do a very nice job.
So like teachers, they're like,
So the survey would be out from, what did you say, the publication date?
12/18 or 2/18
2/18.
to, so March would be what, like a month?
Say maybe the end of
March 30th,
Okay.
right? Like nice even number. So 3/3. Right, there's 30 days in March.
I am checking.
It's 31, so let's do the 31st.
So the dates again for them, for the survey, March 31st. Okay.
So it's pretty much a month and a half. Close to it.
And again, drop-off points right now, City Hall and
Planning desk, right?
the planning desk at City Hall.
And we'll just put library. I'm pretty sure they wouldn't be upset.
Right when you come in, like I say, you can't, yeah, it's pretty obvious.
Okay.
I'll try and track it down tomorrow. Okay.
Just two quick thoughts on the questionnaire. Because we asked if they can, they're familiar, they can identify, they know how to kill it. And then, do you own property, do you manage property, who you pose as a threat? Then it might be more appropriate to ask if you would have knowledge to effectively remove it. And then, when we talk about number 7, with citywide ordinance, would you favor a citywide ordinance? And number 8, might include the following types, any of the following types of property. And then number 9, kind of the same way, should a city-wide ordinance pass, would you favor building property? So those 3 kind of go together.
Yes. Yes.
My suggestion for 1 and 2 responses, instead of the disagree, agree, neutral, should it be yes or no?
Okay.
Anything else? Anything else on Buckthorn? All right, moving on to item D. Do we have a recommendation to go to common council? Do we have a recommendation to go to common council on the updated tree list?
Yeah, so I spoke to the city forester about this item. I have no idea what day it is. Recently. I spoke to the city forester about this item recently. I spoke to the city forester about this item recently, and he wanted to let the commission know that he is in the process of pursuing a grant to review all of the recommendations around trees in the city of Franklin. I apologize, I didn't bring my notes with me about what the grant was or exactly what it covered, but he would like to present that grant to the commission, more information about it in February, to update you, and then hold off on putting forward this change to the ordinances, because there may be a broader set of changes that he seeks a recommendation on that would include the street tree list. So I didn't bring my good notes with me about exactly what that is, but the city forester will have more information in February. So he's applied for a grant, and unfortunately I didn't bring the name of it with
Okay.
me, but it would be taking a broader look at some of the ordinances that control his activities in the
I
city.
see, okay.
And so with that, he thought, why so he's going to present more about it in February. So there is that update, but I don't want to speak out of turn, so I'll let him inform the commission about the specifics. So.
Okay. So.
Yeah, so right now it's not going forward to Common Council, so there won't be an agenda item, and he'll explain more about what the idea would be. You could still request to put it forward, but I can't draft the ordinance without his assistance, so.
Well, that's some trees. EC participation in City of Franklin UDO task force.
Yep, so the UDO, the consultant team that is working on this project for us, has completed their initial review, what was referred to as a diagnostic new zoning map with them in the last few weeks. So they are going to take that recommendation for input from Plan Commission and the task force. So that will occur at a Plan Commission meeting. And there are 2 proposed, February 3rd or March 3rd. So if the commissioners that are participating in the UDO task force have a preference, please let us know. The goal is likely to have it be at the earlier meeting in February 3rd, but it's at the pleasure of the chair. So,
Right, where did these recommendations that are going to the Plan Commission come from?
the consultant firm that is working on this project is called Houseil Levine, and they're partnered with another firm called Birchline.
Oh, with consultant firms.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, that's fine.
So basically what they've done is said, here's where, and ways in which the existing zoning doesn't meet the goals that the city has. Here's our recommendations for a new set of ordinances and also the locations where those would apply. So they developed a map based on kind of they used geographic information systems to evaluate what lots were not. The guidance of staff have gone through and kind of made recommendations about proposed zoning locations. So it's going to be a heavy piece of information for you to digest. And this is just the zoning right now. We have not started to fully delve into. They are developing recaping and the natural resource protection standards. So for now, we're looking at the what's referred to as Euclidean zoning is what we currently have, where it designates the types of users and the dimensions and setbacks of a lot. So that's kind of the step that we're at. So
What type of participant, because this was, an article appeared in earlier newsletter asking for volunteers for this particular, with the UDO task force. Who would come forth? Jerry?
So there is a task force that is made up of the Plan Commission, Commissioner Rourke and Commissioner Sharma from this commission are the Environmental Commission's representatives to that body. Some other commissions will review it, and then there's other members, I think Alderwoman Hanneman. I would have to review a list, so there is a task force session that was open to the broader public for a discussion and review of the maps and just sort of that high-level input. And then there's the online tool where anyone can comment on the map. So, yep.
Okay, I just was wondering how that was, you know what I'm saying, received.
Yeah, there's...
How that was, you know what I'm saying, received.
Yeah, there's, I can't rattle off the list of who all is on the task force, but there's also public input opportunities that exist and will occur going forward, so.
For this meeting, will we be getting a packet of the information, or will we be just giving an email? Getting a packet of the information, or will we be just giving an email?
We typically produce a printed packet for Plan Commission. The report that staff reviewed was like 40 pages, so we would probably give you a printed copy if you prefer, just because it's easier. Some people probably give you a printed copy if you prefer, just because it's easier. Some people prefer that.
Like, I don't need their whole packet, I would just want the UVO stuff.
Sure. Yep. I can
Thank you.
let them know.
If you don't mind, let me know, I can come pick it up too.
Okay.
Just because like, I'm gonna write on it,
I get it.
so,
I get it.
so.
What item was that?
Moving on. City water supply testing overview. Any update there?
No, so I checked with the,
Any update there?
no, so I checked with the, city engineer, and he's happy to forward any questions you might have to the city of Oak Creek. So if there's specific questions, about what the testing standards are, if there's any particular chemical or indicator that you're looking for, we're concerned, about, or type of testing, our water supply comes from Oak Creek. There is the Board of Water Commissioners that does the local oversight of that, but it's the city engineer said that he could help coordinate questions with Oak Creek. So the city engineer said that he could help coordinate questions with Oak Creek. So that's what.
There's also that new program that they just instilled about getting your lateral lines, I believe, checked for lead. If like it was something coming from the house versus like the city water. So the commission versus like the city water. So the commission approved it a couple weeks ago. I think it was with MMSD, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
Any timeline for the tunnel?
Oh,
Ryan
oh
Road?
my gosh, yes. So Great Lakes Water Alliance has their information. So here, for Franklin specifically, because they have it by community. Hang on, where's Franklin?
Because that's such an eyesore on Ryan Road, isn't
Sorry,
it?
I'm not supposed to have my phone out.
It's
Sorry. I'm gonna read it still, because it was really interesting, and I have it up on purpose. Why can't I find Franklin? Mosquito, Milwaukee. Because we're Milwaukee County. Duh.
Yeah, that area south,
so-
excuse me, going east from 76th
So
Street
we
down
have-
Ryan, it looks terrible.
11 weeks. So West Ryan Road from Loomis to South 60th is supposed to start February 28th. It's supposed to allow open cut. Two-way traffic will be maintained with lane restrictions and flagging. South 92nd Street at Ryan Road will be closed to through traffic
Yeah.
March 31st for 2 days. South 68th and Ryan will be closed to through traffic on April 28th for 2 days. All local access will.
The city of Waukesha.
Correct.
Yes.
Yep,
Are you,
correct.
that's what you're talking about, right?
Oh,
Yeah,
yes,
so.
I'm all
Yes.
about water.
And then there's one, they just started the 92nd to St. Martin's Road on Ryan. And that's 8 weeks, and it started on the 4th.
Okay. Yep.
It was, I would, yeah.
So that is not part of the city water supply. So that is not part of the city water supply. It is the return for
Waukesha.
Waukesha's diverted water that they are required to return to Lake Michigan. So that outfall is in the Root River in the south portion of the city. But it's totally separate from our water supply, except that all of it comes from Lake Michigan. Our water supply, except that all of it comes from Lake Michigan. So,
Such an interesting concept.
yeah.
Okay. Did we have specific questions? I know it was the PFAS, right? On the specific questions, I know it was the PFAS, right? On the water quality issues.
Now, I checked the city of Franklin's report that is on our website, it's the identical report that's on the Oak Creek website.
Yep.
And that's fine, I'll leave it at that,
Mhm.
it's on the Oak Creek website.
Yep.
And that's fine, I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Oh.
Landfill life expectancy and future plans?
Yeah, so I obtained a copy of this document from the city engineer yesterday. So I don't have it available today because I didn't get a chance to scan it. We don't have it electronically. But it will be available at your February meeting. So,
Item H, the light recycling program. I know I took a load up to Sussex, Pat took a load up to Sussex.
They were taking the other two.
Did you take a,
The 27th, they didn't need it, because you
Okay.
did yours on Thursday.
okay.
So then, like, it was one of those things, like, they had some, but then if one person was taking right before, they didn't really necessarily think we would have any.
It would be a light load. but-
Yeah, the
So
light.
yes, we partnered with the library.
So.
Well, I had a full trunk. You can imagine.
Yeah, I did too.
Asked at how many people use the library, because I always forget about it, I'm not gonna lie. But, so new business.
All right, item B, new business, native habitat restoration project.
If I could, I'll kind of digress into buckthorn. I've only been back in the States for a week, so. But Southeast Wisconsin Invasive Species Consortium funding for invasive control, and I'm looking into it. I should be able to give you a report at the next meeting. The last buckthorn meeting, a property very close to the one we just approved has been transferred from MMSD to Milwaukee Area Nature Conservancy.
Land Conservancy.
Lion Creek property, that I have been looking at for years, trying to figure out who owned it, what could we do to preserve it. It's really a gorgeous, almost historic prairie. And part of the plans that I'm hoping to do with well, having a group, for lack of a better word, called the Franklin Rift Keepers, to work in either our parks or the natural areas within the city. I'd like to do kind of a kickoff and announcement thing as part of the
exactly, Jim? Where exactly for the new park site?
I don't know the exact block, whatever numbers, but it's just west of Loomis, where Ryan intersects. There's a dentist office facing the lake on Loomis, a couple blocks for sale, a condo complex further north. But the other side of the lake is fairly
Oh.
well, and we apparently now own them all.
Oh,
It's actually the Milwaukee Area Land Conservancy maps. It's a little easier to get to quickly, but it's roughly this area.
Yeah, that's the Ryan Creek property she's showing.
Yeah, so this is owned by MMSD, this is owned by the DNR, this is owned by the DNR, this is Victory of the Lamb, and then this property.
The landfill we just discussed for an hour.
Yep.
right.
So,
Yeah, it's pretty much.
Yeah, so, having been in Charlotte for almost 3 weeks, that's about as much as I could get done before this, meeting, earlier than I expected it to be, so.
sure.
But I think there's lots to work on, I'm ready to do more, and, I'm looking forward to this year.
I like for the dedication for that property right behind the Victory of the Lamb.
Good. Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
impressive.
Yep.
I have no clue who owned it, but I'd be envious every time I drove by them.
It-
Who owned it, but I'd be envious every time I drove by them.
It was previously owned by the Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewerage District,
Yeah.
so,
By whom it would?
MMSD.
yeah, the sewage.
MMSD? Okay.
Yep. And I would put to you, Commissioner, that if you propose to do work in city parks, which I think is wonderful, the Parks Commission would want to hear about the proposal, and I'm happy to help
Yeah.
coordinate that. So, yep.
Okay, thanks, Jim. And, okay, thanks, Jim. And, waiting to hear more and jumping in to help as we can. Funding for EC activities. Yeah, I didn't know if, did we need to develop kind of list of expenses in
In a
budget?
budget, yeah.
Yeah.
Per the last meeting, the note I had, the drafting of a budget should be completed by April because the city begins the budget process June of 2022, so.
So maybe, can we push that to next meeting when we don't have as much?
Yep.
Because
Right.
I'm sitting here.
And do we have any example, like level of detail or example, do other
Yeah,
commissions
I
have
can
some?
put a template spreadsheet in your next packet, and you can just use it as a worksheet.
Right.
By template, you're referring to like a form that you would complete as
Yeah.
far as?
Yeah,
The level of detail, just,
Mhm.
you know, do we just say refreshments, garden gift,
Okay.
I don't know.
I don't know who provides us with handouts.
I do.
You know, for both Arbor Day and for Franklin Lake Ave. I mean, we had a fair amount of information on recycling programs, on, the stuff we could have. It's just a question of how much do we want to do, how much.
Yeah. So so far, your printing that has come from the city has come from the Department of City Development. If you wanted to purchase higher quality, then I can do on a Xerox machine. So we also don't really have graphic design tools, so like if you were looking for something a little bit higher quality and wanted to do it through like Digicopy or something like that, it might be worth considering. So yeah, your printing costs for events, if there's any space rentals, you guys have discussed having food available. the possibility of paying stipends to speakers if that's interesting to you. There's a couple of different things you might want to consider. You know, seeds, trees. Those things are wonderful. And seeds, trees. Those things are wonderful. And bearing in mind that this commission is not directly connected to any particular department, so it's staffed by me in the planning department. And several of the things that you do are in coordination with Public Works and come out of their budget. So we'll have to work with their budget. So we'll have to work with the city administrator to figure out where exactly it fits. So.
Okay, so, February.
Yep.
Anything on this request to participate in regional solar buy? Anything on this request to participate in regional solar buy?
I have not had a chance to pursue this and have not heard back from the resident who put forward the idea. So if you'd like to table it until the next meeting, that would be fantastic.
Well, I have something, because this hit near, and dear. And this goes back probably before any of the recent commissioners were on the Environmental Commission, to a former member we had by the name of Curtis Bolton, and a group by to our attention because of the village of Shorewood. I'm very excited about this, and I have a company that I would recommend out of Sheboygan called Arch Electric.
Okay.
My nephew is a engineering or environmental and highly recommends it. Another reason why I'm endeared to it, it is a major supporter of PBS, which is near and dear to my heart, Public Broadcasting System. So they certainly, like I say, but I know that they support, I would say that this is probably one of the best companies to work with, and it was also on my wish list to get them to provide a speaker for, you know what I'm saying, I would, going forward, I would definitely pass this information on. And even now, but again, we have to see, again, what this solar group buy amounts to. And you say, well, I know a little bit more at the February meeting, so.
Yeah, so the program that the resident was referring to, I'm not sure if this company was involved in it. It's for the contracting and installation, but then the equipment purchases. My understanding is that's the group part. So, and they kind of share the expenses. The question that I have, obviously many communities have already done this, is a municipal partnership with the nonprofit work. So that was the part that I didn't get to work on. So we'll have something more comprehensive in February.
Okay.
So.
Okay, speaking of February, February 23rd, next meeting, hopefully works.
Yeah.
And then we have a tentative, although I don't know, is COVID gonna cancel us again for an April presentation at the library?
So there were use Zoom for remote presentation, and the answer to that is no. The equipment does not belong to the city. It belongs to a program that operates out of there, and so it would be kind of prohibitive to access it. So we're not really sure where that leaves us.
By community room, what you're referring to,
This community room.
the senior?
Yeah.
Got it.
Because the person from the DNR could affirm a date if he could participate remotely. Which, since that's not, that equipment isn't available, we're not totally sure where we would have it.
By equipment, you mean the
monitor and like audio equipment.
who wouldn't have the equipment?
It exists, but it doesn't belong to the city. So, exists, but it doesn't belong to the city. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Whereas at the
Oh my gosh.
library, we have the equipment available, and we
Okay.
usually have a librarian assisting us with the setup.
Okay.
But are they currently a reduced capacity because of COVID? But are they currently a reduced capacity because of COVID?
Yeah, I think that was the issue.
I think that was the issue.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Is there any, like, do we have any, you could ask like Root River if we could use their space for free? Like, cause then the idea would be you're attracting people to buy their own beverage or something. Right, like, I don't,
Oh,
Maybe.
you mean the bowling alley?
yeah,
Oh.
like a community space maybe of some sort. I know people don't, like, some people, then it's like, people might stay away, or they might get a little rowdy.
Well, and we have high school.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
Students were a large chunk of the participants.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, talk about it next time.
Yeah.
Although we may be missing publication time.
What if, maybe it's something where we could use the school, like FPS. Like I'm sure their auditorium has a, I'll look into it. I'll call the rec, because it'll be through the rec department. For like the auditorium.
Okay. I ran out of
So
items
sorry.
put on the agenda.
But I'll be brief. This proposal that we went through at length tonight is the second time in just over a year that I've been on this commission, where property over a year that I've been on this commission, where property has been modified by the developer before we even knew the project existed. Now, I don't know if that can always be avoided, but it doesn't seem to be being avoided very easily. Is there some way, Marion, and I ask you because you're a guru, that we could be informed of these projects sooner in the process?
Ideally, that would be the case. Ideally, that would be the case.
Why do you think I abstained?
Yeah.
I knew something that most of you don't because I've been on the commission a little longer than most of you. But why do you think I abstained? I had my reason.
Okay. So I was feeling that same way too. Like, you knew there was a wetland on the property, and that's why I was like, let it. Like, I kind of moved past it at a certain point because like, well, it wasn't our fault. Well, it is your fault. It's your property, and you were putting fill.
Clearing highway right of way. Yes, we're the most loose stripers found in this country.
Yeah.
Highway right of ways all over.
Yep.
You know, Franklin Honda, where you look, summertime, you'll find blue stripe in the middle of the city of Milwaukee.
Yes.
So, you know, if they didn't know it was coming, they should have known.
Environmental Commission recommendation form for 1 second, please. So within the recommendation is a finding. They went through a permitting process to do this, and there are several types of permitting process that don't come before you. That is questionable and could be something that you could look at how to address that in the UDO, and I would be interested to
I don't know,
see-
what are you, which one are you interested? Okay.
So, okay, there is within the ordinances, it's two pieces. It's the degree of nonconformity and whether or not an approval would negatively affect the city's ability to enforce the natural resource standards. So even if something has occurred through a permitted process, they basically used it to circumvent that requirement. So ideally, you would have more input, but you can also take into consideration that it may negatively impact the city's ability to enforce those ordinances. So there's 2 UDO citations that's in the text of the variance process. So, and in your finding is a finding that the bill was placed. So, and in your finding is a finding that the bill was placed on site, impacting those natural resources through a permitted process, but that you did not have the opportunity to review it.
Yeah.
So that is in your draft findings. I can't find the spot right now, but it's already there.
I think I read that because I was like,
Yep, I can't find the spot right now, but it's already there.
I think I read that because I was like,
Yep.
because my question was like, why wasn't this reviewed? Because like ideally, like if you go to a site and you do any sort of development on it, there's always a delineation on it, especially if there's a known wetland, and there's obviously a known wetland. And so I was like, why would developing or filling, they would end up putting silt, like the silt fences around it to
Yep.
make sure that it wasn't being impacted.
So the DNR permitting process that they went to requires that they not impact the wetland, otherwise they would have to do wetland fill permits, which would be a prohibitive process.
Yeah,
The DNR does not protect the setback and buffer.
got it.
So I've been able to figure out what legal structure locally allowed them to circumvent that process, but they went through the engineering department's filling and grading permitting process. So,
Well, and that's what I kind of wanted to be like. It seems like you lucked out by going to an overarching used. I wonder if, like, could you do an ordinance, like, could it be something where even if an ordinance is less strict, our ordinance would be, has to still be complied with? Is that something you could write in your, like, in the UDO?
there are aspects of it that are like that, and then other aspects where we cannot supersede federal and state government.
Got it.
So,
And I,
the state agency that, there are some things where they will say local regulations still apply,
yeah.
but apparently this isn't one of them. So,
Well, and that's kind of why I mentioned too, I'm like, that's a question for the DNR, not here at this moment. Because, but then, I don't know, I feel like maybe that's something we can add, like if wetlands have to be delineated before anything can occur on the site.
yeah, so we do, the grading and filling is through the engineering department, but they are using regulations that are within the UDO.
Okay.
So,
But maybe that's something we can add is,
Still been here, but, it just seems like we're kind of an afterthought.
yep.
And, we're gonna put the guy on the spot. I could have said no very easily, but I saw no point here. I just don't see a future with that. It's a shame.
Well, and it does leave the question in my mind, as we pursue enhancing our requirements related to invasive species management and that kind of thing. That is the type of objection that we will hear. It is going to be expensive. So.
All right, is there anything else that we want for future agenda?
can we learn a little bit more about those conservation easements?
Sure.
Um,
Oh, I think I meant to show you one
Oh.
at some point. Not you specifically, the commission.
yeah.
Yeah, that you and I really connected on that.
I was like,
Holy Toledo.
Right, so hang on a second. I've been working this, and you're telling me I can't go on these properties? Whoa.
So there is a template that
Okay.
we in the department use that because they're required through a few different types of that we in the department use that because they're required through a few different types of development processes and of course the natural resource special exception process. It is restrictive. You can use the land, like you can. Sometimes they allow for trails or that kind of thing, and they are modified pretty routinely to allow for a little bit of use, but not for the damage to the natural resource. So they're most common on trees and wetland resources. So
So I wonder if that could be something where we add in, if it's invasive though, where we add in, if it's invasive though, like, there has to be some sort of management. Because otherwise, there's gonna be no point in having a resident manage buckthorn if these easements are gonna sit there and just
Yep, that's worth considering.
keep reproducing what we're trying to get rid of.
Yeah.
What we're trying to get rid of.
Yeah, so I'm happy to put the template in your packet so you guys can see it. Just so for your information, they are also sometimes recorded through the land division process, and so older like subdivision plats, it'll be part of the plat itself. It's pretty wide. Sometimes it would be protecting a single tree.
The trail that you mentioned that is going to abut this property that we're discussing, how far along is it?
So they have completed the site survey, and then obviously the route is set. So they're working on the permitting step right now, and I haven't sat in on the development calls in a while, but they have to work through, because of the location of the trail, it is on an existing kind of berm that used to be the, yep, so it had a stop in St. Martin's and then continued south. It passes through a number of wetland areas and natural resource areas, so they're kind of working through the permitting process for that now, having completed all the field work delineations and that kind of thing. So 22 budget, and hopefully is going to start sometime next year, the year after, or this year or the year after. It is now 2022. Who knew we'd make it this far? So.
Well, we're going to put a trail along that utility right away. I guarantee you, utility right away. I guarantee you, these guys electric better be told, you're not spraying, what shall we call it, herbicides on a trail.
It's going to be asphalt. So, and then I think there'll be, it's going to be asphalt. So, and then I think there'll be,
People, dogs, pets, are not going to stay on the trail, on the asphalt.
I believe the city will be responsible for the maintenance, although I would have to check with the city engineer. So,
I can give you right now, they do not. I can give you right now, they do not spray on the current trail that's over by St. Martin's. They just mow. So they mow about a foot to 2 feet off the trail, and that's it. So that way, like, if kids or anybody's off the trail, they're off only that 2 feet, and they don't actually go in. Anybody's off the trail, they're off only that 2 feet, and they don't actually go in. I believe it's the city that does it, because I see the city over off of.
the one that's,
Because I live off of St. Martin's and Forest Home.
yeah, this is a city trail.
Yeah. And so then it connects, and then it goes behind, all paved until you get into Muskego, and then they're cheap, and it's all gravel.
Yeah, so this is actually the start of this future trail. They're working through part of the approvals to possibly go behind the cemetery here and then travel on the east area along 116th Street. So there's like an on-street section, and then on down to connect to the other Muskego Trail south. So.
Muskego seems to pave that stuff.
Well, they have a pretty large network, but they don't.
It's not all paved, because we
Yeah.
went all the way, so my daughter and I just rode it all the way down, and we stopped at a park, so we ended up getting into a park. And then I looked at where we were, and I was like, oh man, we're halfway to Culver's, called my husband to come pick us up. No.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there a motion?
Please,
Done?
let me slow it.
Yeah. Okay, is there a second? All in favor? All right, meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Turn that Zoom meeting off.